5, 4, 3, 2, 1. My voice sounds... Well, hi again. We're down at MAPS, the Military Air Preservation Society Museum, and this is one of my favorite spots, folks, and you've got to come down here. Every time I come down, there's something new. And remember, it's on the west side of the Akron-Canton Airport. And our guest today is an unusual gentleman. He spent years, I called him a gentleman. What did I call you before that?
Well, before the camera was on, it was something different.
Okay. And so this is an unusual gentleman that had an unusual job. He spent years upside down eating a pizza. And you know why he ate a pizza? He's going to tell us why he had to eat pizzas, because the Red Baron Pizza Company was one of his sponsors. Welcome, Jim Keller.
Great to be here, Ernie. Always a pleasure to be around you. I tell everybody I know that you forgot more about aviation than the rest of the world knows, so it's an honor to be sitting next to you.
Check will be in the mail.
Perfect.
Okay.
Make it large, an extra zero. It's Christmas time.
Well, you're a hard guy to please. But anyway, look at this fancy. This is Jim Keller, and he flew with the Red Baron demonstration team. Is that it?
Yes, we called it the Red Baron Stearman Squadron for a long time, and later on in the company's history, they changed it to the Red Baron Pizza Squadron because obviously they were selling pizza and not Stearman's. But the Stearman was the plane of choice. It was all about marketing. The company came up with the idea to use a plane dragging banners around near county fairs and different things in Minnesota, Iowa, out in the upper Midwest when this all got started in 1979. And going back a little bit further, the company Schwann's Foods had bought out a frozen pizza company in Salina, Kansas, and they wanted to come up with a name for the company. And somebody's child in the company decided, let's do something different here rather than have a typical Italian-style name for the pizza. And they came up with the idea of Red Baron, and it stuck. And so after a couple of years, they got the idea, well, we're going to buy an old biplane and drag a banner and try to get people to our location to try this pizza out. And so the very first year, they bought a Stearman. At the end of the summer season, they actually sold it and thought that was going to be the end of it. Well, then next spring came, and next thing you know, they buy a plane back, and then 2 planes and 3 planes. So you go forward, what was it? One of the, like 1981, somewhere in there, they were flying rides all over the country. Flying promotional rides, taking passengers up and doing loops and rolls and everything. And so a few of the guys were together down in Texas, and there was an air show close by, and they got the idea, we're gonna enter this air show unbeknownst to the boss or the company, and we're gonna fly in this air show, which they did. And finally, they reported back to the boss in Minnesota what they had done, and it turned out to be a positive thing and not negative. And so air shows continued and more, and they ended up finally with 7 airplanes. And we had, at the height, I want to say 11 or 12 pilots. When I joined Red Baron Pizza, they had been in existence for quite a few years, and so they had refined this a fair amount. And I was lucky to have excellent training, guys that were very, very experienced. I got a lot of training in formation flying, which I had no experience whatsoever prior to that. None whatsoever. Not only that, doing aerobatics in tight formation, which was at first ungodly challenging and at times exciting. But you know, like everybody else, you do it enough and enough training, you get the hang of it. So lucky me, I was at the right place at the right time, and was able to fly along with them and not scare anybody too bad or myself.
Well, how long were you with the company, and when did you start? When did it terminate?
I started in late late 1998, and it ended in 2008. In that period, I worked with Red Baron Pizza for about 8.5 years.
And was it a year-round job?
Well, at the beginning, it wasn't. At the beginning, we had about 2 months off in the wintertime because there's not too much in the way of air shows going on, but we would still be out in southern Arizona outside of Tucson in the desert training. But we'd get a fair amount of time off, and then you'd hit the training, and next thing you know, the rides would start, and the air shows would start again for the season. And we were all over the country with 7 airplanes. Typically 4 were together, and those 4 were doing air shows all over the country. I mean, we did big shows, little shows, and everything in between, from California to Massachusetts, and everywhere in the country, Seattle to Florida. But we also did tons of rides along with the air shows. There were plenty of promotional rides with the press, the newspapers, TV, radio personalities. And again, going back, it wasn't just a bunch of guys out having fun. We had a marketing purpose, and that was to help sell the Red Baron Pizza. So come along Saturday and Sunday, the days of the typical air show. The company would invite their customers and bring them out to the air show, and they'd get to meet the pilots, and certainly they'd be up front and get to see all of the performers as well as the Red Baron pilots. We flew frequently with the Blue Angels, the Thunderbirds, you name it, Sean Tucker, Leo Loudenslager, all the big names in the industry, Jimmy Franklin, you name it, we flew with everybody. So anyhow, we'd have a special area set aside for all these customers, and the pilots would come in, and, they'd get to meet the pilots, and, we get to talk about it and all. It was sort of an exciting thing for them, and it was a good marketing program for Schwann's, the parent company of Red Baron Pizza.
Now, Jim, tell us about the Stearman. I think a lot of folks don't really know what a Stearman is.
Oh, boy. The Stearman was designed by Lloyd Stearman, who had a lot of designs in the 20s and the 30s, and this particular model was the Model 75, which he designed as a trainer for World War II. And I'm thinking he came out with this design in 37, maybe 38. My memory escapes me, along with my gray hair. Anyhow, it was the predominant trainer for the young fellas joining the Army Air Corps back during the war period, 40, 41 through 45. So they built close to 10,000 Stearman, and a typical young guy, 17, 18, 19 years old, would go to whatever base to train. And, he might be in a Ryan, or he might be in a Fairchild or a Piper Cub, but the majority of the trainers were the Stearman, and it was a biplane, pretty good sized biplane, 32-foot wingspan, roughly 25 feet long, and about 9.5 feet high. It was not a light airplane. Metal fuselage, sort of a truss style of fuselage with wood wings, and not the easiest plane to fly. And maybe I should rephrase that. They flew well in the air, but it had a high center of gravity and narrow landing gear, and so takeoffs and landings could be excited for the rookies. That's
why the cadets knew it as the Yellow Peril.
Exactly. It picked up the nickname Yellow Peril. If you look around in books that show the old trainers, you see these things either on their back or limping along sideways with a busted up wing or whatever after some poor young cadet had an accident. But if he could learn to fly that as a primary trainer, then he would go on to the basic trainer, a little bit heavier airplane, more power, a little bit more complicated. And assuming he does well there, then he gets into the advanced trainer, which would be the North American AT-6.
And you owned one of those for a while.
I did own one for about 11 years. That's a funny story how I came about it. I was working on a low-level waiver with one of the guys from the Aeroshell team, and they flew 4 T6s. A good friend of mine, Steve Gustafson, and he rolled after a day of training in the Stearman. He rolled the T6 out, and he says, "Did you ever fly one of these?" And I said, "Steve, I never even been in one." He said, "Oh, we're going to change that." So anyhow, he put me in the front seat and talked me through getting it fired up, and we took off, and we flew for probably a half hour, 35 minutes, and all we did was aerobatics. We turned that plane inside out and upside down, and it was so much fun. The plane has very, very good controls, very balanced, has a nice feel to it, and no bad habits other than, like the Stearman, if you were to not pay attention well in landing, you could end up with a ground loop and tear the plane up, or worse.
In the military, there are 2 types of Stearman pilots, or Stearman cadets. Those that ground looped and those that are going to ground loop, right, on landing.
I've heard that. Of course, that applies to guys that have had an engine failure or not. Those that have and those that will have. So fortunately, knock on wood, I never joined that club. I've had 2 engine failures in my career, but not in a Stearman, either one. But no ground loops and no mishaps, fortunately.
Well, you're here and you're all in one piece. That's great, but you don't quite fit into the uniform, right?
Well, it's maybe a tiny bit snugger now than it used to be. It's not terrible. Backing up, though, to the aircraft and the accidents and the age of the aircraft, we flew everywhere in the country, and we took all sorts of rides. We took thousands and thousands of rides, and I did personally as well as all the other guys. And so some of the people that we would take for rides have never been in a plane before, and guys, girls, young, old, everything in between, people from the high end of the economic status in life to the low end, and everybody in between. But something that's common about these people that are going to go for a ride is most of them are pretty apprehensive because they're getting in an airplane that says 1943 or 1940 on it. We had one that came off the line December 8th of 41. Anyhow, they're saying, I'm not so sure I want to ride in this airplane that's 60, 70 years old. And, of course, my response, as well as others, is that these planes have withstood the time. I mean, it was a great design. They were built like a tank, very, very safe. As much as a lot of guys cracked them up, everybody walked away, unless you just drilled the thing straight into the ground from an altitude. They were built so strong. It was just a phenomenal design. So anyhow, a lot of people were apprehensive about getting in the airplane, and you try to settle them down and get rid of their fears. So the next thing you know, you're taxiing out and you take off. And once you get about 25 or 50 feet off the ground, they feel how solid and stable the plane is, and you can see out all directions pretty well because it's open cockpit. You see the smile on their face because there's a little mirror up here where the passenger and the pilot can see each other, and people just relax. And this is universal. I would say 98% of the people that I took for a ride loved it. They were just tickled to death.
When you did maneuvers, violent maneuvers, the other 2% were sick?
In the 8.5 years, thousands of rides, I had, I think, 3 people get sick, and maybe 4, now that I think about it. But nothing bad. Now, some of the other guys had a little bit lousier luck there. Some of them had more people get sick than me. But, you judge your passenger, and you don't try to beat them up and make them sick. You want them to enjoy it. And back to your one word, violent. The Stearman's a big, heavy airplane. It doesn't do anything violent. It's sort of like driving a Cadillac as opposed to a Ferrari. It doesn't handle real fantastic, but It'll do all of the maneuvers slowly and gracefully and just beautifully. And for air shows, it's the best plane out there because it doesn't move real fast, and you stay right in front of the crowd, as opposed to some of these guys that are high speed, and they're in front of the crowd for 5 seconds and they're gone for 2 or 3 minutes and they come back again. We were in front of the crowd the whole time. So back to taking your passenger up, you do a number of maneuvers with them, and you could talk to them on the intercom, and if they weren't happy, needless to say, you stop right away. And if they were enjoying it, you do a little bit more.
What were your most memorable experiences, you or the guys you know, in hauling some people around?
Oh, boy.
You had an NFL guy, I understand, one time, didn't you?
I had Bruce Laird in there with me, and forgive me, Bruce. We were up in Winchester, Maryland, just above Baltimore, and I just had one airplane there. Typically, we would have 2 or 3 airplanes in one location and 4 another location. For whatever reason, we only had one there. And so Bruce and I went out, real nice guy, swell guy, and we did some aerobatics, and I'm ready to head back, and Bruce said, oh, no, let's do some more. So we did a few more loops and rolls, and I'm ready to head back, and I tell him on the intercom, he said, no, let's do some more. Okay. So finally, after that, I said, let's head back, because, we sort of had a motto, I'd rather somebody go home wishing they had more than somebody going home wishing they had less. So anyhow, when we get back, Bruce was fine until, we landed, we pulled up, and I'm helping him get out of the plane. He's about 4 shades of green, and I sort of felt bad for him, but what can I say? He asked for it. And he had a cute girlfriend there, and she was probably thinking, what the heck happened? What'd this guy do to my boy Bruce?
So how did it end?
It ended fantastic. As I said, he was a great guy. That was a Friday or Saturday, for all I know. It wasn't Sunday. But anyhow, the Browns, the next day, this was 1999, the Browns were in town and played the Baltimore Ravens for their first year back. And I remember flying over the stadium right near the end of the game. And we got together either Sunday night or Monday night at Ruth Chris Steakhouse for a TV program that they put on there. Bruce at that time was doing color commentary for the Ravens. He was a retired quarterback for Indianapolis and San Diego, if I remember. And so we got invited to go to this, and we had 2 pilots and a mechanic, and we had dinner and stayed for the interview. They had a couple of the players, big guys about 4 times as big as you and me put together, and it was a fun time. So that was a memorable experience. Another one was meeting Skitch Henderson down in Tampa. And I tell you, what a nice guy, what a swell guy. I ended up taking him for a ride and turned him upside down and inside out. And on the way back, I said to myself, geez, this guy's not the youngest guy in town. I wonder if I should have done all that. But he enjoyed it, and, we had a lot of pleasantries between us. And he wrote me a letter a week or 2 later from Carnegie Hall stationery, the whole 9 yards, thanking me, and if I'm ever in New York, get a hold of him, and he'll make sure that we go all the right places. Well, isn't that nice?
Yeah, well, great, Bob. Can you tell us who he was?
Skitch Henderson was a phenomenal band leader, originally born in England, and came over here, I think, in the middle of the war. And this is something new to me, he told me at the time, this is probably back in about 2001, he told me about flying hurricanes in the north of Africa. Of course, I never knew he was a pilot, and that was a shock. And I was a little bit familiar with the north of Africa and the campaign there, and I rattled off a couple of the German pilots' names, and his eyes got big as golf balls, and we hit it off fantastically. He was a great guy, and what can I say?
Yeah, I never knew the guy was a fighter pilot.
I didn't know it either. He told me he flew hurricanes, and he called them hurricanes, being English. And sometime in the middle of the war, he ended up coming over to America, And apparently he told me he flew a B-17 one time, and he actually flew a Stearman one time, but he was still doing something with the Army Air Corps here. But he was glad to get out of Africa because the Germans were just knocking the heck out of these English pilots. They were knocking them down one after another.
They sure were. Now, can you describe a typical event you put on? What maneuvers you had? You can use your hands all you want. And tell us from the beginning what your four-man team or yourself or whoever, what you did at an air show.
Well, let's back up and start with just the typical ride outside of the air show. Let's say we show up on Thursday and we take up the newspaper and the TV station, a local radio station or two. Typically, the four of us would go out in tight formation. We'd brief what we're going to do beforehand with our passengers. And also, I would strap the passenger in and give them a safety briefing explaining to them, if there's an emergency, here's what you have to do to get out of this thing safely. Everybody wore parachutes, and all the parachutes were up to date. They had to be repacked, I think, every 6 months. Can't remember anymore. Anyhow, typically what we would do is get into safe airspace and legal airspace. You can't do acrobatics just anywhere. And the four airplanes in tight formation would do a loop. And then the leader would split off number 4, and then he would split off 2 and 3. And so I typically flew the number 2 spot, which was on the left side of the airplane. I flew left wing. I voted conservative, but anyhow, I would dive, and right away I would pull up and go into a roll. And then, coming out of the roll, I'd have the nose down and get some airspeed up again and pull up into a hammerhead straight up in the air until she almost quits, and you're saying hello to Marilyn Monroe up in the clouds, and you kick the rudder and a little opposite aileron.
And then what happens?
Well, Marilyn never responded.
Oh,
but
she didn't. I didn't mean Marilyn now.
Anyhow, you kick a rudder and the airplane comes straight back down.
When you're up here, okay, show us with your hand now. Okay,
all right. You're straight up until you run out of energy, which didn't take real long, I might add. And you kick it, and then you come straight back down. Sometimes you'd roll it on the way down or whatever. And you may do another roll, and you may not. But again, we didn't try to overdo it because some of the passengers would not be used to that. Most of the passengers would not. And so we give them a taste of a few maneuvers, the loop, the roll, the hammerhead. Then we would regroup and fly back. And if you were lucky, if you were flying number 4 that day, once the 3 guys were together, number 4, he could come up and he could roll the whole formation and then tuck into slot. And, that turned on everybody, to see the plane either going around them, or if you were in the number 4 to see yourself going around the other 3 airplanes. I have a little story there. One of the other pilots had a elderly gal in there, and she says, "No, I want this straight and level. I don't want any of that fancy stuff." So they're on their way back. The other plane had done some aerobatics, and the other plane rolled them on the way back, and she started raising Cain with the pilot. "I told you I didn't want to do any aerobatics." Well, he was flying straight and level the whole time. She saw the other guy rolling around him, and she thought she was doing aerobatics, which she wanted no part of. So anyhow, that was a typical profile if we were taking passengers. In the air show, we had 3 parts to our show, which ran 17, 18 minutes long. Typically, we would start with a barrel roll, and then
Can you show us a barrel roll with your hands?
I can do that. You dive and get a little bit of energy. You pull up and you go over this way, and you're facing 90 degrees over here. You're upside down, and then you come back through, and you're going back in the original direction. And the barrel roll, if you're on the right side of the formation or in slot, is pretty easy to do. If you're on the left side of the formation, it's a little bit more challenging. It takes a little bit more practice and effort to do that. So that's the barrel roll. But anyhow, from there you go into what's called a wing over, and that's to reposition you and keep you in front of the crowd. So you do a wing over and you come back down and get some airspeed again and do a loop. another wing over, come back down, do another loop, go in the other direction, and then we would be going parallel to the runway, and the crowd's over here. Get down here, and the lead pilot would do an Immelmann, and he would say 1 pull, 2 pull, 3 pull, 4 pull, and we would all end up going in a line in front of the crowd, upside down in trail. And so then number 4, once everybody's stable, he would call pull and roll, and we'd go to the upright from being inverted. And then we would do a snap roll, all 4 of us in a line, that was sort of exciting. And then the lead guy would break off, and he'd come down in front of the crowd again, go in the opposite direction, and do a nice slow roll in front of the crowd. Number 2 would do a 2-point roll. 3 would do a 3-point roll, and number 4 would do a 4-point roll. So that was our first act.
Okay, can you tell us what the points were, like with your hand?
Sure. If you're doing a slow roll, you just bring the plane around in a nice symmetrical, smooth rolling fashion. Keep it on a point out in the distance. And the number 2 guy would roll it, and he would be inverted, hold that for a few seconds, and then roll back up. Number 3 guy splits it into 3 pieces, and then number 4 guy, here's straight and level. A quarter, there's a half, you're inverted, and then you got 3/4 over here and back upright.
Okay, folks, did you get all that now? Okay.
Now, if you
don't try that at home, okay, in a car. You'll never make it. You mentioned an Immelmann. Can you explain the Immelmann? Do you know where the Immelmann came from?
Max von Immelmann created it as an evasive maneuver, I think, in World War I.
You're right, World War I.
And basically, if you've got a guy on your tail, what you do is you pull up and you do half of a roll, and you roll out, go in the opposite direction. And hopefully you could lose this guy, or even better yet, if he doesn't time it very well, you can turn around and get on his tail.
Yeah, I was surprised. You know your history, too.
Well, I know.
I was trying to catch you on that one, but didn't succeed.
I know a little bit of history, not enough, I might say.
Now, how long were you with the Red Barons?
8.5 years.
What did you do before you started there?
I was a CPA for about 20 years, and for the first 5, it was enjoyable work. And after a while, I just sort of felt like, this isn't me, I'm not having a lot of fun. And I had taken flying lessons at Martin Field and learned how to fly, and so I'd do that in the evening or the weekend just to leave the accounting and all the BS on the ground that I could, and just go up and bomb around in the airplane. And for whatever reason, when I took flying lessons, I never had this great desire to fly a plane from point A to point B. It was my desire to go up and mess around and have fun with it, for better or worse.
That's the ultimate career change, from being a bean counter to an aerobatic pilot.
Well, that's close. It was great for me. The finances and the accounting were good education, and I think a good help throughout life.
It helped you to count the number of turns you made, too. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Well, that's true, especially when you're doing spins and you're facing Mother Earth coming at you.
Wasn't there a movie or books written about a guy who always was fantasized about having a different life, an adventurous life? And I think he was a bookkeeper of some kind, too. Mr. Mitt, what is that?
Walter Mitty.
Walter Mitty. So you're the ultimate Walter Mitty on that, gone from a desk and calculators, in your time, calculators and computers, to being an air show pilot.
Well, I showed up in the accounting world about the time computers were becoming more common, and so that's probably a good thing. Prior to that, a whole lot more of it was done by hand, and that'd drive you insane even quicker. I don't think I would have lasted 5 years or 20. That would have lasted about a month.
Okay, what do you do now?
I'm retired now. The company used this program for 28 or 29 years, and finally somebody within the company decided, we're spending a few $1,000,000 a year on this program. We might be able to spend that money better elsewhere to market our products. So they shut the silly program down, and maybe silly is the guy that did it, not the program. They shut it down, and that was 2008, and I've been a father ever since. I guess I never got to the point telling you along the way that as much as I was out being a sort of a gypsy and flying the air shows all around the country.
And having fun.
Well, most of it was fun. It was hard work, but it came with good rewards. And everybody looked at you in this fancy red suit and doing the loops and the rolls. They thought you walked on water. At least a few of them did.
First time I ever heard an air show pilot call it hard work. Are you just trying to impress us? You know how hard you worked having fun?
Well, I'm trying to make the rest of the world feel guilty,
You sure succeeded, I think. Well, all the guys that are just fed up with their jobs and their lives.